all the stress we feel is around time, right? It's not like milestones. It's like, oh, I've got to get this done, or I only have an hour to do this. And that's usually mapping against some expectation you have. So if you change your expectations about what your goals are and your milestones to make them fit the resources you have, whether that's the financial, the time, or the emotional resources, you're going to alleviate yourself of so much stress. And you can take that long view of success. So I have a job today, I have kids, I can only do this 4 hours a week. Yes, you're not going to get as far as somebody else who has $3 million and is doing it 60 hours a week, but you can still make progress.
Hey, it's Renee. Welcome to the Into the Wild Show, the podcast for women who want to build incredible mental strength to level up their business and lifestyle. I'm Renee Warren, the founder of We Wild Women, author, speaker, award-winning entrepreneur, and your host. Together, we will make you unapologetic about shining your light, growing your business, and turning you into a wildly confident and successful leader. This is for you, the visionary, the go-getter, the entrepreneur, and for those that need a real kick in the butt to get going and to dream bigger. Each week, I bring in leading experts and entrepreneurs to help you take leaps in the right direction, because I know the best advice comes from someone who has successfully done it before. So, are you ready to level up? Welcome to Into the Wild. Hey, you wild women! My next guest is a creative product and marketing strategist with over 20-year track record of creating category-defining products and customer experiences that deliver strategic, measurable growth for businesses. She has worked with Williams-Sonoma, Pottery Barn Kids, Thumbtack, Babylist, Baby Center, Walgreens, Sephora, Change.org, and many more. She left her corporate life in Silicon Valley to attend the New School of Cooking and then founded Make Bake in 2019, a CPG baking and food craft brand. Her patent-pending edible sugar sticker system created an entirely new product category and is a game changer for parents and for professional bakers. Make Bake edible vegan food and baking decoration stickers are sold in over 150 independent retailers and growing across the U.S. Today, Kristina and I talk all things what it means to start a consumer packaged good business, from manufacturing design to even being called on from some pretty big retailers, and why she had to say not right now. Please welcome the incredible Kristina Schlegel.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I am so obsessed with your product and I can't wait to dive in because you have some really juicy stories to share with us about this whole journey of how you began. So tell us quickly, where are you from?
I'm originally from Southern California, born and raised, but I've been living in the Bay Area for the better part of the last 20 years, kind of in the heart of Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I love SoCal. We go back to San Diego as much as we can. Is that where you're from?
I actually grew up in a combination of LA and Orange County. So like my mom lived in Downey, my dad lived in Laguna. I went to undergrad in UC Irvine, grad school USC. So I really was that like quintessential Southern California girl for years. And then in 2000, I moved to the Bay Area to start my super random, not intentional career in Silicon Valley in tech, where I worked for, almost 20 years off and on. And going back to Southern California is like always my favorite. And my kids love it now too. Like they want to go to the beach and they want to hang out. Yeah. But there's something about Northern California that is exceptionally beautiful. So I feel like we kind of get it all. We're spoiled.
You do. There's like big trees, big trees, and there's wineries. I used to live in San Francisco. It was a fun time.
Yes, I lived in the city as a single girl and then eventually got married. And so now we live actually in Walnut Creek, which is a community on the East Bay that has big backyards and
we have Walnut Creek. That's on the other side of the strait, right? On the side of the bridge?
Of the Caldecott Tunnel.
Okay.
So you go you come off the Bay Bridge, you go through Oakland and Berkeley, you go through the tunnel, and then you kind of appear on this other end with all these like beautiful hills and mountains and a bunch of communities around there. And that's Walnut Creek too.
Yeah, we have a good friend that lives out there. I've been. It's beautiful. Love it.
It's a nice place.
So what was one of the toughest moments you experienced as an entrepreneur?
Oh my gosh, I have to pick just one.
One that's maybe a like close memory.
Definitely after spending 2 years kind of going from initial concept through product development, we launched in January of 2020. Things were going spectacularly well. And literally like 10 weeks after we hit the market and things are just building, the pandemic hits. And so that was just a curveball for everyone for sure. But being like a new brand that had already spent all this time in development, it was really gut wrenching. And of course, like a lot of female entrepreneurs, I'm also a mother. So I was battling all of these things that came unexpectedly for my business. And then, I also have 2 young children. My son was 9 months at the time. My daughter was 6. And trying to figure out, I don't have childcare. I just invested all this money getting my business to this point. And so it was just incredibly stressful. On top of not knowing, what the heck was going to happen with this like global virus that was, we're all hunkered down wondering if we should leave the house.
So outside of the biggest headaches and you becoming like a full-time childcare provider, what was the impact you felt in the business? Because there's like, I know it was just launching, but you had projections, right? So what was the impact there?
So we had launched in January, and for people who don't know, I have a company called Make Bake, and we make this line of edible stickers. And so, we say like, it looks like a sticker, tastes like a marshmallow, works like a charm, right? Like it is something that you haven't seen before. And it is super fun for kids to decorate their baked goods, but it's also really like a godsend for moms who are baking for their kids. So baking fails, nailed it, Pinterest fails, those are all very real things. And our products, you literally like peel it off the sheet and stick it on cakes and cupcakes, and it looks like super dazzling. I talk about what we really sell is baking magic, right? Like we help moms make those moments that they really want to create for their kids. And so that's what we make. And so we launched to market with this really unique product. It took a really long time to develop. We've actually filed for multiple patents on it. Like it was a whole process. And the first week that we were in market, I had like 500 followers on Instagram at the time, and I had reached out to a handful of retailers. And within a few weeks, I'd sold like $6,000 worth of product, just with no marketing budget, right? Just word of mouth. And I was like, okay, this is definitely something. Because sometimes people think, oh, I have this great idea. Like, is anybody else going to get it? And you don't really know, right? Like, you don't really know until you put it out there what kind of a response you're going to have. And we had a great response. And we had influencers contacting us wanting to use the product. We had independent retailers who we had reached out to and were like, oh my gosh, yes, we've never seen anything like this. And so we were, within a matter of weeks, building up to like, I think 20 or 30 independent retailers who we were going to ship product to. Valentine's Day did so well. That's when I made the bet to order like the next batch. So I had really only launched with one product. I said, they're expensive to make, big order minimums. So I thought, let's just do Valentine's Day. It's a big baking holiday. And let's see if this flies, or if I'm just, eating my own Kool-Aid over here.
Eating your own marshmallows.
Yeah, eating my own marshmallow sticker Kool-Aid over here. So it did really well. And then so we immediately made the decision to buy like 6 more. We'd already done the design work, the illustrations. And so we placed the order with our manufacturing partner to make 6 more SKUs so that we would have unicorns and dinosaurs and, all the things kids love for birthdays. And then literally as those things were being made and like shipped on the truck, they were like on the truck coming to us, like the pandemic hit. So we had retailers we had pre-sold to, those retailers now who were all, small, cute boutiques. They were calling us, requesting us to cancel their order if it hadn't shipped. Everyone was just, you probably remember the early days. It's like nobody knows what was happening. So just like the whole world shut down. And so here I am sitting on like, I don't know, it was like 15,000 units of like edible stickers.
Oh no.
Going like, okay, now what?
Oh my gosh, just eat them. Eat your sorrows away.
If I had let her, my daughter would have probably eaten them all over the course of a year.
Yeah, because these are like retail shops that were closed, right? People, oh gosh, so what did you do?
So for people who don't know, when you sell a consumer product, there's kind of multiple paths you can take, especially today with technology. You can go what we call the D2C route, which is selling on your website. that feels really easy to do and it's easy to set up. But like the biggest challenge you have there is getting people to your site. So now you're looking at doing a ton of social media, or you're looking at paid advertising, PR, and that takes a really long time to build that pipeline. And because I had worked in Silicon Valley for so long on several e-commerce brands, I kind of knew what was involved in doing that. And I knew how candidly expensive it can be to build that audience and that customer base. So I chose to go the wholesale route. And so when you do wholesale, you can either sell, or, people sell in many places, but you can sell to small boutiques, like independent mom and shops that are, in every main street in America, the places we love to shop and support. You can sell to big retailers like Target and Albertsons and Walmart. And those are really different experiences. It's really hard to sell to major retailers. Even if they want you on their shelves, the financials and the economics and logistics of that are really daunting and very difficult for a small startup. So my hypothesis, or sort of theory, if you will, was I'm going to start with small retailers. And that's when I'm really learn, like, do people love this product? Are they restocking it? What feedback are they getting from customers? And that was something I could do with my own time, right? Like I could do the business development. I could reach out to these shops, send them emails, send them samples, call them. That didn't cost me anything other than my time, compared to like paying influencers, paying for ads, paying for professional photography, all the things that would have been required to build a D2C business. So going into this, I had a strategy based off my previous work experience of, this is going to be bootstrapped. We're going to be on a budget. We want to really test this idea. This is the best way to do it. Now, I didn't know a pandemic was coming when I made that decision.
No.
And so, of course, all those small shops immediately shut down. And then eventually they started to open back up. But what I saw happening for the first year of the pandemic is that those small retailers were incredibly risk averse, which is really understandable, right? So even though they were opening back up, and even though they were doing a lot of shop online, buy curbside, and even though people were baking more at home and there were demands for kind of like birthday party in a box, what I observed and experienced was those small retailers were sticking with the vendors they knew. They were not into taking risks. They were going to stock their best sellers, the things they knew they could push, and the things that they knew would have the highest margin. And so even with the world opening back up slowly over that first year, that was a hard place to be as a new brand. And not just a new brand, but a new brand in a category that we were effectively creating.
So was there anything else in the market like it?
There was not, and still is not, anything that is a one-for-one for our product. Now, that's not to say that there aren't substitute goods, right? Like there's lots of ways to decorate a cupcake or a cookie or a cake. So there are other ways that people are doing this. But in terms of like an edible sticker product that looks, tastes, and works like ours, there's nothing else on the market. And nor should there be, because we're, something we created, we're in the patent process, we're intent on protecting that IP. But it is a new category. So when someone comes across our product, they get that it's for baking, but there's still so many questions that the customer has, like, how do I use this? What does it work on? Does it taste good? And so when you are on social media, or if someone comes to your website, you have a lot of ways to tell that story and explain that to customers. But when your product is like a little envelope sitting on a shelf in a retailer, and those customers haven't heard about you, that's where we talk about like you're building a new category, right? So if I walk into a small shop and I look at candles, like I know what candles are. I know how they look. I know how they work. Now shopping preference, right? Price, size, aesthetics, smell. But if you've never heard of us and you walk into a retailer and you see our product, if the person who works at that shop can't help tell our story, it's really hard to get people to kind of pick us up and figure it out on their own. And so those are all the things that any new brand faces. But, we had the layer of the pandemic on top of it, really just kind of like disrupting that whole process. So I really had to pivot and think about how we were going to use that time because, retailers had shut down. Every brand in the world was on Instagram saying, buy my products, right? So like all of a sudden the market for direct to consumer business had become very flooded. So if I had been in business for like 6 years and had 100,000 followers, then it would have been easy, right? We would have marketed to that base. But I think at that point we had like 1,000 followers or something. It wasn't a big enough customer base. And then on top of it, I was a mom of 2 young children who lost my childcare. Like our nanny said, we're not she wasn't comfortable coming. Totally understand. We were kind of left to our own devices. And so now I was stretched thin with like a new set of challenges. And so the year immediately following our launch ended up looking very different for me. We didn't sell as much. And I knew that I was competing with all those other brands. And so rather than trying to make myself crazy, trying to drive revenue, I sort of went back to my roots of Silicon Valley software design strategy, and thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to use this year as an opportunity to really figure out product market fit. I'm going to take this time to figure out who's buying my product, what do they love about it? Do we need to iterate and change anything about it? How can the packaging do a better job? And it ended up being a really good investment because I actually learned some things during that process that ended up dramatically kind of shifting my focus. And what I mean by that is when I first launched, my thought was, we're going to market these to moms for like easy birthday cupcakes, right? Like no Pinterest fails, make it beautiful. And people do use it in that way. But what we ended up seeing is that kids were actually using them a lot more. Which in retrospect, you're like, duh, if you have edible stickers in your house, kids are going to want to play with them. Like, seems like the most obvious thing in the world now. But at the time, that wasn't how I was positioning it. So that insight, I don't know if I would have slowed down enough to really get it had it not been for the pandemic, because the early success was good. We could have just kept pressing down that path. And it turns out that like being a food craft brand actually has a lot more legs and a lot more potential than being narrowly focused on this other part of the market, which is talking to moms. And so that led to like changing the way we photograph things, changing the way the product was configured, changing the packaging, and ultimately even changing our formulation. When I saw how many kids were playing with these, I realized that they were too delicate, that we needed to like go back and make the sugar paper actually be a little bit different so that kids could handle them. So those were all insights that I got during that first year because I was sort of forced to slow down and use my time differently.
It was a gift.
It
an
was
unfortunate gift because you probably would have never done that work, or I would have been too late.
Or we'd have just been going down this path and like building up this thing. And then eventually we would have probably figured it out. But what I think it allowed me to do is really understand that the brand that I was building was actually bigger than this edible sticker idea, and that this world of like home baking and food crafting was much bigger and more interesting. And so when I see the future for Make Bake now, we are still very focused on our IP of this edible sticker system, but I'm trying to build a brand platform where moms come to know, like, and trust us around helping them create like magical baking memories with their kids. So that's going to give us permission to do a lot more things than edible stickers in the future. Like when you think it's my kid's birthday, it's Christmas, it's Valentine's Day, what are we going to make? Like the goal is for Make Bake to be the first brand that you think of, and that we'll have an assortment of products that help moms do that easily, successfully, and with, hopefully a ton of joy.
Yes. I mean, I love baking because it is pretty straightforward. I don't like cooking because you can interpret it in so many different ways. My son loves to bake as well. And also, these would be for me like a forcing function to actually use them. Like if I ordered them, like, oh, someone's birthday is coming up, I'm going to stick these on. And then I look like I know what I'm doing. Because I don't. I really don't.
And decorating is actually one of the hardest things. There are a lot of people who, in the research that we've done, who are very comfortable baking, but when it comes to actually decorating, it's a lot harder. And by the way, I say this as a professionally trained pastry chef. So after I spent all these years working in Silicon Valley, I actually went to culinary school for pastry. And
That's random.
I mean, yes and no. I had always loved baking and the idea of it, but like didn't really have like a model for it at home. Like my grandmother that I was close to was from Greece. And so the baking that she did was very much from that culture, but it wasn't like cakes and croissants and cookies and stuff like that. And my daughter
was spanakoppitas.
Yeah.
Or is that even baking? That's like in between.
Spanakopita is like a savory dish, but like kulurakia, which are like the twisted cookies.
Yes.
And melamocarna, which is like this honey almond thing that's really good. but not like what you and I would think of as like classic American.
Like a cake or a cupcake.
Yeah. Like no cupcakes, zero cupcakes. Cupcakes. So my daughter was 1. I had sort of gotten to a point where I'd been working for a long time and felt like I wanted to do something different. And so I said to my husband, I'm going to take a sabbatical. Like, I don't know that I'm going to open a bakery, but like, I really want to do this. And so I went to culinary school. It was a 6-month program and I loved it. I loved every second of it. And I got better as a baker, but I was terrible at decorating, especially like the kids stuff, right? Like I could make like the chocolate cakes with like the gold and, stuff you would see like in a patisserie.
Yeah.
But like baking for kids is so hard because they want like all these characters and these bright, elaborate things. And like, I just was not good at it. And so here I was, this graduate of professional pastry school. And then like, I wanted to make my daughter a birthday cake. And I was realizing like, well, I can make this and it's going to taste really good, but it is not going to look like that, wowzers kind of thing. And that's really at the very earliest stages where I started realizing like, okay, how does somebody like me who like, I have a design background, like I'm good in Photoshop and Illustrator, how do I work in a medium like baking for kids and make it look cool with like no ability to do the fancy piping? And so even though I didn't start Make Bake until years later, I think like the very earliest seeds for what we're doing now kind of came from that lived experience of wanting to be that mom who made things with and for my kids. And so I spent a lot of time buying things, trying products, not really finding what I wanted. And it wasn't until my daughter was a little bit older and she wanted to also start baking with me that it really came together for me that like, okay, why isn't there a brand in this space? Why isn't there like a national brand that is focused on like family-friendly baking? There's 41 million kids in the United States between the ages of 3 and 12. And like,
man, that's bigger than Canada. And that's just one age group.
Yeah. And last year in the United States, consumers spent $500 million on edible decorations. And half of that was on decorating kits. So people are doing this. This is happening. People are at home trying to figure this out. So I realized like, this isn't just like a me problem. This is a big market. And there's something that we can do about it. And so I started just digging in and looking at all the different products that people were making in the baking category and sort of asking why. Like, why is this made this way? Why isn't it made different? Could we do something like this? And again, that's like that Silicon Valley training of like always kind of going in and trying to figure out like what's going on and why aren't things different than the way you're experiencing them. And that's when I stumbled onto like the edible images food technology, which is what our product is based on.
I love it. I love how the gift in the pandemic was how it forced you to slow down and really do the research. I think that's a huge chunk of building a business, especially in a new market completely, that people miss. They just dive in. They're like revenue without really looking at the customer experience.
Yeah. And I think as an entrepreneur, you get excited about an idea you have, and then you share it with a couple of people, usually friends and family, and they're very supportive and they're like, this is so cool, and then so you start kind of running for it. And I had done a lot of like category research and sort of understanding the baking landscape, but I really didn't get kind of, for lack of a better term, intimate with our customers until the pandemic hit because I just had to, right? Like I didn't have any other way to move the business forward that fit with my life and budget. So what I could do was talk to people like that. I was good at. I mean, I did product research for years, getting people to connect with me and share with me kind of their insights. Those are so hugely valuable. And people will say sometimes, oh, it's qualitative. You only talk to like 40 or 50 people. Well, I will tell you one aspect of my business that I did some research on. I probably talked to like 30 people and got a sense of like, okay, this actually, I think this is an element of this product that we can agree on. Well, I literally just like a few weeks ago found out that, I won't say the retailer, but a major retailer that we're talking to, somebody from their team told us that they spent like $1 million basically doing research and they came to the same conclusion. So, qualitative research when done well and you really listen to your customers, you don't need that many people telling you the same thing.
No, and I think so. I did qualitative research course in university and they said you can't get a representative sample unless you have at least 100 people. That was always the de facto. So it was like, oh, you won't get the information you need unless you speak to 100 people. So when I did my research for when I was starting my previous coaching business, I spoke to maybe 10 women that were considered my ideal customer. But we were on a call for an hour and a half. To talk about getting insight, it's like I had enough information to at least start with and to go in a general right direction.
And I think what's interesting about qualitative research is yes, if everyone is telling you something different, you're not going to get like a strong signal. But when you have like this people telling you the same thing over and over again, who don't know each other, who are using similar language in their description of their problem, you don't need that many people to know that like this is a space that is valid or that this is a feature that is important. Now, as you scale up, you start to learn, okay, when you're now talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of people, that's going to not hold in the same ways. But like when you're starting a business, you're not trying to get to like 5 million. You're just trying to get like to 10 and then 100 and then 1,000, And so we've sold now something like over 20,000 units of these things in the last couple of years. And so that's a lot of data to know, what's selling, what's not. And because I am small, you always kind of wish you're something else. Like when you're small, you want to be big. And when you're big, you want to be nimble and flexible. And so I always encourage people to like take advantage of the stage that you're in. So right now, the stage that I'm in is that it's very small and that we're growing rapidly, but I can afford to do things that don't scale, right? Like when you're trying to acquire 100,000, 1 million customers, you have to do things that work at scale. I can literally email every customer and say like, I'm the founder. Thank you for buying my product. Would you be willing to answer 3 questions? Like that doesn't scale, but it works for me now. And it gets me the information I need to get to that next decision.
Yeah, I think there's a word, especially now, that kind of, for women, scalesism is the word scale. There's so much pressure to grow your business, to scale the business. And it's okay to be where you're at right now. It's enjoyable. Look at the direct connection you have with your customers.
It is. And I think people associate scale with 2 things. One, obviously, is success. There is this culture we have, and especially coming from tech and Silicon Valley. And, I know you're familiar with that world as well. Everything is measured in like billions of dollars, right? So when you're over here and you're like, oh, well, we sold 20,000 of these, that sounds like nothing in comparison. But I sold 20,000 last year of these things that like nobody's ever made before. And I know exactly how everybody used them. That's like a treasure trove of information that we're taking to this next phase. And revenue, right? It can be hard if you're in a position where you're really depending on that revenue to put a roof over your head and food on the table. There is a very real pressure there. And so I do want to acknowledge that I have this luxury of being able to take this time, that this wasn't, when I started all the way back in 2018, I was still consulting, I still had another form of revenue. And I'm grateful I have a partner who can sort of like keep our family going while we make this investment. And so if you're not in a position to have that luxury, there's so much you can do outside of whatever it is you're doing for work, for paid work, right? Like if you have a day job and even if you have kids, you can still pursue something where you can be successful in doing that and not driving yourself crazy, I think is changing your expectation around timelines. So all the stress we feel is around time, right? It's not like milestones. It's like, oh, I've got to get this done, or I only have an hour to do this. And that's usually mapping against some expectation you have. So if you change your expectations about what your goals are and your milestones to make them fit the resources you have, whether that's the financial, the time, or the emotional resources, you're going to alleviate yourself of so much stress. And you can take that long view of success. So I have a job today, I have kids, I can only do this 4 hours a week. Yes, you're not going to get as far as somebody else who has $3 million and is doing it 60 hours a week, but you can still make progress. And that, I think, is a thing that, especially for new entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, mothers, it's really hard to keep yourself kind of focused on what you're doing and not compare yourself to other people who have a different set of circumstances.
Before we continue on with the incredible Kristina, talking about consumer packaged goods, so when she refers to CPG, it's consumer packaged goods, I want to tell you about mine. You've probably heard it before. It's the Morning Practice Planner, and it is available for purchase right now at morningpracticeplanner.com or visit wewildwomen.com and you'll see a planner. Now, when I was creating the framework for this planner, I asked myself and the women that I was working with at the time, why add more to the morning chaos? How can this tool actually make me more productive? What do I need to organize and learn about my own routine to set myself up for success? And so I created this planner mostly for myself at the beginning, but I quickly learned that women like you wanted it. In the Morning Practice Planner, I teach you how to organize your year, your quarter, your month, and days to become the most productive version of yourself in alignment with your values and your mission. But how? It's the process and the accountability to yourself that pushes you to start and to commit. The planner starts with some key exercises, which I call the theory, and then you get into the daily pages. Here's where the magic happens and where your days start to become even more successful. And so I encourage you to go on over to themorningpracticeplanner.com. That's www.morningpracticeplanner.com to check out my own CPG and get one for yourself. The other thing with scaling too, that's important, is this word called hustle that's so woven in to what it means to scale a business. And I always say sustainable businesses grow sustainably. And that means according to what you're able to put into it in a healthy manner. So if you want to work 80 or 90 hours a week and that lights you up and you're healthy, then you go right ahead. But most people listening to this show are women, they are mothers, or want to be mothers, and they have a life outside of work. And so this is why I loved your input on this, like the gift of the pandemic was the pause, in a sense where you had to do something with what you had. And you got to know your customer more. You got to know what they wanted, what they were purchasing, how they were using your product. When do we ever actually think about that?
No,
we hardly ever do.
Especially when something is doing well, then you start getting on this hamster wheel where you're like, oh, the early feedback was good. Now I'm just going to just put my foot on the gas and chase that number. And you don't think to slow down until much later, usually when you hit a ceiling, right? So you like hit some threshold where you're like, oh, we're not growing past however much we're doing. Why is that? Well, that's when you go back and realize, oh, well, we're kind of at the limit of this market. We need to reposition ourselves or think about this differently. And so I did sort of have the gift of doing that early on. And it's really paid off because one of the challenges that I have now is that we are actually too small for the opportunities that are coming my way. So the work I did to build the brand, to like really nail the execution, the packaging, the positioning, the aesthetic, the price point, we have major retailers coming to us like repeatedly, like not even like us pitching them, but like things landing in my inbox from major retailers. And right now we have to say no because my company is not properly scaled or capitalized to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So I'm in this place where if you look back the last 2 years, things seem like they could have been bigger or gone faster. But literally at a watershed moment where I'm going to be going out to raise money here soon. And if we can properly capitalize the business, a year from now, we will be doing like 7 figures plus based on the opportunities we're saying no to today.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of people that don't understand that too. They're probably thinking, especially in CPG, well, if Target's coming to you, for example, how could you say no to that? Isn't that like somebody's dream? But there's this thing between where you are now and what they expect, right? Which is all that process and system and how you can deliver the product at the speed, at the quantity that they need.
And at the price point.
And the price point.
Yeah. A lot of people have a dream of being in big retailers, and it does sound very alluring, but it's very complicated. You know, their supply chains are complicated, their financials are complicated. Like in the food category, for example, you very often have to pay to be on the shelf. So before you sell anything, if a major retailer wants to carry you, they will also charge you for that shelf space. It's called a slotting fee or a shelf fee or whatever. And so you kind of need deep pockets to get into business with those companies. And that's where you see a lot of companies start to take on investors, because even if you have a really successful business, making that leap, it's not just like a little step function. It's a big step up in legal responsibility, complexity, scale, manufacturing, how you manufacture a product. It's a big leap. And then when you look at the numbers, the crazy part is like the first year or two, it doesn't actually even pay off. Like it's basically a wash because of all the money you have to invest to get there. You're basically hoping that you break even, and then you need that extra capital and cash flow to get you through that hump until you actually achieve that scale. I mean, for us to have a product on a retail shelf would mean that we would need a product that sells for less than what we sell it online and in specialty retailer. And those retailers, what we would make wholesale would be significantly less. Their margin requirements and their fees would eat into our profitability. So just to give your listeners an example, one of the scenarios we just said, no to for a major retailer, I would have made less money in that first year selling 120,000 units to that retailer than we made selling 15,000 units.
Wow.
Less profit. Sorry, I should re-say that. Not less revenue, but at the end, the net profit would have been less.
Until you get to a point where you can service that retailer.
Yeah. So when you step up to the big leagues, there's this messy middle in between where you your profitability goes down quite a bit. But it's also where you get distribution. It's how you become a household name. And so there's a lot of reasons. You diversify your revenue stream, right? Like as a business, I want to be selling in as many different categories as it makes sense for my brand and making sure they don't cannibalize each other, right? Like I don't want my low cost items at mass to undercut the people who value like a more expensive experience. And so it's not just like this thing you say yes to or turn on to. You really do have to think strategically. And going back to your point about speed and hustle and all of that, you can really get sucked into making those decisions. So I'm here for the long haul. I'm trying to have a really long view of this brand that I'm building. And it is so hard to be patient sometimes.
So, but what a compliment. And obviously you would be thrilled to receive that pitch in your email or in your inbox that some big retailer wants you.
Yeah.
Do you consider that a data point? Is that validation on some level? Yeah.
Exactly. So I totally consider that product market fit. So like people will say, okay, well, you've only sold in like 100 and something independent retailers. Would this be viable? Well, okay, this retailer reached out to us, then this one, then this one. Okay, enough category buyers who don't know each other are coming to us and saying, we're looking for innovation in this category. We think that you're it. That is another data point. And it's actually one of the biggest data points that we're taking into our conversation with investors is saying, you need to not just look at the revenue of what we've done last year, but you need to look at the revenue we turned away. And the reason we turned it away was because in some cases it wasn't the right fit, right? It wasn't the right retailer for our brand. But in many cases it was like, we're not set up to be at scale. We need to own our own manufacturing. We currently use a manufacturing partner and it's not the best fit for us. They are not able to really work with us in a way that works for our business. So we need to establish that capability vertically in-house. We need to be able to bring our unit costs down and we need that cash flow to build our brand. But what I'm saying to investors is this isn't a hypothesis. Like these are all the retailers that we've literally actually said no to in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
And so that's part of our journey is trying to convince people who invest in companies like mine that what they're seeing now is the beginnings of what I have a vision for to be like a national brand.
Love it. I have a whole new appreciation for going to a grocery store even and looking at the stuff on the shelf. Because there is a whole journey behind that one product that's sitting there.
It is. And I would say, I would take that a step further and say, especially someone who worked in software for years. And, one of the advantages of that medium is you can kind of have this idea and then I can meet with some engineers and like literally like 2 weeks later, we can have like a version of it, right? Like we can test it. We can see it out into the wild. What it takes to get a product thought of, developed, made, manufactured onto a shelf. Like as a consumer now, I have so much more appreciation for the things that are in my home because I know what it takes to just get one thing made. It's a slog.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I appreciate you sharing that journey. That is a lot of insight because I have not really dug that deep into consumer packaged goods before. And I mean, I have a planner. So I manufactured my morning practice planner. It's beautiful. It's not on anybody's shelves, even though I also reached out to about wholesale opportunities, but I don't have the SKUs for that or the numbers for that. And I got like a little taste of what it means because like I'm back here with my calculator crunching the numbers. I'm like, I'm not that profitable if I was to ship you, 100 of these things versus me just selling it online. And then selling online is a longer process, but it's more profitable. So I'm like, you know what? I'll extend my revenue into a new year and do it myself. But I didn't really set it up to do wholesale anyway. It wasn't the intention.
And those are really great insights for people who are listening, that like people start in different places and then you end up kind of switching based on what you learn. So I started out with wholesale because, like I said earlier, I had come from this world of D2C, and I just kind of knew how hard it was to, build those audiences on a bootstrap budget. And so I was using wholesale as a way to kind of basically figure out product market fit. But now that we have it, and now that even though these large retailers are coming to us, like I actually think D2C is where we need to be. Like we need to be in a place where customers can come to our site, search for their favorite theme. They can build what they want. Like, do you want a cupcake kit for a party? Do you want like a cookie decorating kit for kids to do? And sort of kind of go through this process that we can deliver this box to you that's going to, meet this need. And so you start one place, you go another, you learn something. Yeah. But with the CPG stuff, I had never done this before either. So on top of everything that I'm sharing with you, you have to remember, this is like my first time doing this. I lived in software for years and decades, right? Like
so you physically didn't touch a thing except for your computer.
Yeah. I mean, and I made products that have been used by millions of people. Like I know what it's like to make something that's used at scale. I understand that marketing problem, that design problem, but taking it into like a physical product environment has been such a wild experience. And I don't say this to discourage anybody from doing it, but more so back to that expectation setting. There are so many creative people making wonderful, delightful, useful products out there, but just be prepared. It's a long journey. Set your expectations accordingly and manage your budget accordingly, because you don't want to sort of get discouraged early on because you just didn't have the right information going into it. It's really rewarding too. I have always found, even going back to my design days, that the most rewarding thing about making things is hearing the stories of the people who use your product and that little moment of joy it sparked, that small problem it solved. It doesn't have to be life-changing, but for example, our products are made in an allergy-free facility. So moms who have kids who have peanut allergies, nut allergies, gluten, egg, dairy allergies, they can safely use our products. I get messages from moms all the time who are like, birthday parties are so hard for us because my kid always misses out, or I can't make anything that looks super cute and I found your product and it like saved me. And I freaking love that. Like I live for that stuff. That is why after almost, 3+ years into this idea, I'm still here, because those are the things that light me up about what I'm doing.
I love it when you're like, changing somebody's life, and it seems like such a silly thing to change somebody's life, but you are. These little stickers on cakes. Do you guys ship to Canada?
We do not ship to Canada right now because it's like a complicated process for customs and stuff. Being a food product, we're not labeled correctly. We tried it for a little while, but it's a whole project that needs its own like process. Like I need 3 months to kind of figure that out.
You can still mail them to me.
I can send you some as a gift.
I want some.
No, we can definitely send you a gift box, but selling them in Canada right now is just like, again, going back to expectations. You have this list, right? You see everyone who, whether it's, they're doing all the social media things or they're selling in all the places. You don't know like why they made those choices or what resources they have. And comparison is the thief of joy, right? Like, so you can go out and compare yourself to people, or you can just focus on the things that work for you. And I would love to sell to Canada. It's on my wish list and we will get there. But like,
well, we want them,
but
I know we do.
Right now, I have like a really core set of priorities. And that for me at this point is figuring out how are we going to manufacture these ourselves so we can grow the business. And that really comes with funding. We're sort of at the limit of like what we've been able to invest to get the brand and to get the product to this point. But to get to that next level, it's not a little bit more. It's that big step up. And so we
Totally.
need partners in that. And once we have that figured out, that is going to open all these different opportunities for us, whether it's D2C or mass retail or shipping abroad. Our product is so unique that I actually get inquiries from other countries. There's a retailer in Australia that has 500 stores that is like, we can't find these anywhere else. And so it's so exciting to get that feedback. And it's so frustrating to feel like I can't do anything about it right now.
Yet. You'll get there. You will get there. I love this. This is a great chat. I have one last question for you. When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that to you?
Oh, I think for me, it's probably intertwined with this belief system I have about always being curious. My personality has always been such that I was that kid who was always asking why. And then I sort of became that adult who didn't stop asking why. And I think curiosity is just, it gets you into trouble for sure. But it also is like where the reward is. Like, so for me, like being wild is just about staying curious and not letting anybody like dampen that spirit of me and say, well, this is because how it's always been done, or this is what everyone else is doing, or this is what we believe. And my response is just like, yeah, but like that's, I don't know. What can I just want to scratch over here. Like I want to know, why are we not doing this? And so I think if you want to have life take you in interesting places, like I was public policy grad student who went into software, who like went to culinary school, who started an edible sticker company based off like an old food technology that I found a way to reinvent. And that's like a wild ride that I got to take and I'm on because I'm just always kind of curious as to why, why. You can't.
I say ABC, baby, always be curious.
Yes, always be curious.
ABC. All right. So if people want to find you online, where can they go?
So they can find us and shop our collection online at letsmakebake.com. And if you want to see all the really cute, fun things our customers make, you can follow us on Instagram at letsmakebake.
Awesome. Kristina, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So there you have it. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Into the Wild. To make this girl happy and to help reach other women who are dreaming of starting their business, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and everywhere you listen in. Also, if you want to find me in the wild, check me out on Instagram at Renee_Warren. That's RENEE_WARREN. And leaving you with one of my favorite tips of all time: the best advice you could ever receive is from someone who has successfully done it before you. Until next time, ladies, peace out.